Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Yael and this is Andres. And live we have with us Lucia Torres and Marta, who is our group of UWC online for tonight. We're so excited to have all of you with us. We are people from over 40 countries and we are sitting all around the world, all across time zones, and looking forward to the talk we have tonight. So
Yes.
we're just going to start. We wanted to tell you that if you have any questions to address to our speaker, Lucia, you can do that. On your right-hand side, there's a bar in which you submit your questions for other people's questions. And they would be able to show to us, and Lucia will answer them. Okay, so now we will explain to you who Lucia is. Lucia is from Spain. She's a UWC Italy graduate, and she's an anthropologist expert, and she's an expert on world religions and world cultures. She studied heritage management, and she's been working in Spain on heritage management and tourism. She worked with the Spanish Agency of International Cooperation and Development in Honduras and Bolivia. She will talk to us about activism and global citizenship, and we are really, really excited to have her. Okay, should we start?
Let's do it.
Okay, Lucia, take over.
How do I do it?
You begin, Lucia, and I have your slides, so you can tell me how to move ahead.
Okay, so everybody, welcome. Perhaps you already know the topic of today's lecture. We'll be talking about kind of different ideas of how to look into what it means to be a global citizen, and being active in what it actually means. I title my introduction from collectivism to activism because I'm going to talk about a personal experience I had this late summer, and it was kind of that way of moving from just seeing things on the computer to actually getting active and doing something on my own. So, Marta, if you go to the next slide, please. Just so you have a bit of an idea of how this talk is going to be. First, I will talk about my personal experience, what happened, how I deal with it, and then we will clarify some concepts that I kind of think are important when talking about global citizenship and being active and participative in changing the world. And then we will kind of, I like to put on the table some questions to think forward about what it actually means, and also to tidy it up a bit, this lecture, with the main question that you guys have to answer today, this week, for the course, which is if we should open borders for everybody. So on my personal experience, basically, I was back from doing all my work in Latin America and kind of a bit fed up with the way politics were happening in Spain, in Europe, you know, trying to make my place in the world. And suddenly, I always try to stay connected with the world. I mean, I use many different platforms on internet, but Facebook is one that actually I think for UWC students and for people that actually want to know what's happening in the whole world is very good, because you get you contact with the people that you've already made contacts, and then you are part of groups, and everybody just puts their information there, and then you can just actually select what is good for you. So I was just looking through the UWC alumni group, and suddenly there was this call for help from somebody from Germany saying, anybody in Madrid, please help me. There is a family of Nigerian refugees that had just been sent back to Madrid and they need help. So this person was Liv Frunhoff. She actually lives in Cottbus, which is quite funny because I did my master's in heritage studies there, but I never met her. But so I contacted her. She gave me her phone number and we started chatting on WhatsApp. I told her, what's up? What do you need? She was like, look, I'm working with she's a doctor. I'm working with this organization that helps refugees, and this patient of mine that is a refugee that has been helped by this organization, she just has been sent back together with her 8-year-old son and her husband back to Madrid because of something called the Dublin regulations. At the moment, I didn't have any idea what the Dublin regulations were, neither did she. We were all kind of like why will they, I mean, if they were already in Germany and they had been there for 8 months, why will they be sent back to Spain? And she was like, I don't know, they just went, like police just show up at her home and told them to pack whatever they could pack in suitcase, and they took them to Madrid, and apparently they're just in a hostel and no idea what's happening. So I told her, okay, how can I contact them? She gave me their phone number, and what I did was just call them. And I say, hey, what's happening? And they were like, well, we really don't know. We just, once we were at the Madrid airport, the German police that was flying with us just left us there in an office, and then they told us to call 911 and ask for help. And the social services just came and took us to this hostel. And I was like, wow, that is amazing that something like that is happening in my country, that people are treated like that. You know, I never imagined that refugees will be treated like that. So what I did was I told them, okay, give me the address of where you are and I'll go out and meet you and we'll see what's happening. So I went there. I met the couple and the 8-year-old son. I tried to talk with the social workers, but well, things in Madrid are not very good at the moment. So social workers couldn't really do much. The Refugee Assistance Office, which is the Spanish ministry institution that actually has to deal with refugees, had given them an appointment for, I think it was 15 days after the day they arrived. So apparently they were supposed to stay for 15 days in this hostel with only basically 3 meals per day and a roof and a bed, but not more. And they were just completely hopeless, and I felt really bad for them, and also very angry with my country, because I thought, what the hell? Why are things done this way? So first I said, what do you need? And because they say, well, we need to be able to get in contact with a lawyer because we don't know what's happening to us. So I tried and find lawyers. It was really difficult. At the end, I was able, thanks to the UWC network in Spain, I was able to get in touch with an NGO that works with refugees, and they were able to provide some legal assistance. Then we were kind of like, I mean, in the meantime, the main things, the basic needs, we tried to address them, such as clothes, because they weren't able to pick up that many clothes with them, and in the hostel they were staying, they couldn't do their washing, their laundry. So we provided them with some clothes. And when I talk about we, it's because what I did when I figured out what was happening was I contacted the whole UWC alumni that I knew were in Madrid and kind of asked everyone to chip in a little bit. And then they were feeling sick because the reason why this woman knew Liv, the student in the alumni in Germany, which is a doctor, it was because she had been really sick. She also had some really major mental health issues because all the things that happened in Nigeria related with Boko Haram. And Liv, her doctor, was really worried about her, and so was I. So thanks to my mother, who works in a hospital, we were able to take them to the hospital, and they got a complete checkup, and we knew that some things needed to be addressed, but basically they were healthy, or as healthy as you can be in that situation, because the stress actually makes your body suffer a lot. And then from then on, the next concern they had was that the place they were staying, they felt that their needs were not met. And I talked with the social worker that was in charge of their case, and after, I think it was 2 weeks, we were able to move them to a different facility that it wasn't just a hostel, but it was a place where they will have their own room and a communal kitchen where they could cook their food, and they weren't just being because their main concern was that the food that we were getting in the hostel wasn't good or not even enough sometimes. So basically, regarding this particular incident, that was it. But that was kind of the trigger that made me think, wow. Well, it made me realize that a lot of things that you see in the papers, in the newspapers, in the TV, and so on, you see them as something that is happening very far away. You know, we hear all these things about what's happening in Turkey and the Balkans with Syrian refugees trying to get to Central Europe, to Germany or to Austria, and you think, that's just happening there. But actually it's happening everywhere in Europe because of this Dublin Act. And now if we go to the next slide, Marta, please, we can see what the Dublin Act is. First, the Dublin Act is a kind of a regulation, a whole European Union set of laws that it was created to determine which EU member state was responsible to examine the application for asylum, and which is under the international protection of the Geneva Convention. Basically, what was happening before this regulation was that because in each EU country has different legislation regarding what is given to an asylum seeker or to a refugee once they have been given the status of refugee. For example, Germany and Sweden are some of the most welcoming countries for refugees because they provide with more than some other countries, such as Spain, for example, which our social system is not so developed and not that much is provided. So to avoid that Germany and Sweden and all the rich European countries to avoid that they will get all the requests for asylum, the EU countries decided that the country of entrance of an illegal immigrant or of somebody who doesn't have a proper administrative access to the EU, that country will be the one who will have to determine whether they will be given the status of refugee. So that's where the asylum seeker will have to ask for it, and that actually meant that country will be the one that will be hosting it once the refugee status will be granted, because the refugee status is only granted for one country in the world. You can only ask to be a refugee in one country. It's not that you can, once you're regarded as a refugee, you can move around freely. And Marta, if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So basically, the Dublin system is consisted of all these regulations, and then there's this database called Eurodac, which what it does is like when somebody in Europe, in the European Union, asks for asylum, they take their fingerprints, and if for any reason these people try to move to another country and ask again for asylum, this other country will take their fingerprints again and check it with this database, Eurodac, and if these fingerprints actually appear, these people will be sent back to the first country of entry in the EU. This is what happened to this family that I met, which it was a bit surreal because you could think that this will happen really quickly, but actually it took 8 months for the German authorities to process the Eurodac query, and for the Spanish authorities to recognize that they have entered through Spain and that they actually had asked for asylum in Spain, and then to send them. And I think that it's a bit unfair that once they've been for 8 months established in a country, their kid was going to school, the husband already had a job, they were kind of getting integrated. It was really sad to see how just because European government tries to be very bureaucratic, things actually just can go back all the way. Okay, so after this, I thought, and seeing also the conditions in which all these refugees that were sent back to Spain were held, because they were sent to this hostel, which was kind of a waiting space. They were just sent there to wait for days to come till they had their appointment to the office. And I thought, wow, I mean, when you really don't know what your faith is, because they weren't given any information, they didn't know whether they were going to be expelled from Spain, sent back to Nigeria, which were where they were terrified. I also, at that point, there were a lot of Syrians and Middle East refugees that had done the same as these Nigerians. They first entered through Spain, through the south, through the Africa cross, and then once they were in Spain, they all tried to move north. Many times because they already have people living in the north, in the countries of the north, in Germany, in France, in Sweden. Other times because they think that those countries can provide better for them. And I saw in this hostel a lot of people, especially a lot of kids and a lot of grown-ups kind of looking desperate because they couldn't do much. I mean, they were set in a place that wasn't even in the center of Madrid. It was in the outskirts. They didn't know the language. They couldn't go out for a walk. I mean, they could, but there wasn't much to walk around because it was an industrial area. So I decided to put in practice with the UWC alumni kind of a social service that was, it was kind of like we talked with the people that were running the hostel and with the Red Cross, which were actually in charge of the refugees, and we tried to go once a month there and do some activities that are kind of lesser, but also so they learn basics of the language. And if any of them has any needs that the social workers can't address because they don't have time or it's not something that they think is their responsibility, we always tell them, well, tell us and we'll see what we can do. And so far, we've been twice there, and it's quite good. So that's the experience, and then that makes me think about what it is to be a global citizen, right? I mean, we live in a world, we know what's happening, or we think we know that's happening all around the globe, but actually sometimes we are not really aware of what's going on. And if we go to the next slide, please, Marta. Right, so this is my idea of how actually our perception of global issues happens. Okay, so there is the world, and there is a limited knowledge that we have of what's happening in the world. There is media, of course, you have newspapers and so on, but actually what coming generations, new generations are doing is using the internet for being aware of what's happening in the world. But sometimes we think just because we connect online, we are getting to know everything that's happening in the world, and that's actually not true, because there is this idea of curated online content. You know, you have proxies, and Google, since the moment you sign in and you look for something, they already know what you're looking for, so they will always kind of give you answers to your questions related to the previous searches you've done, and also they kind of know which ideology you prefer, so they will give you always, if you're looking for news, they will always give you answers. I mean, if you search for some news, they will give, the answers they will give, Google will give you, for example, are always related to newspapers that are ideologically close to your own ideology. So at the end of the day, also the same happens in Facebook. I don't know if you realize that many times on your feeds, you always see the same people there, and you think, but I have many more friends on my Facebook list. Why I'm only seeing this is because of proxies and because of all of this computer engineered stuff that I really don't know much about. The content we actually have access through on the internet is curated. I mean, it's curated by machines, so it's actually by formulas, by mathematical formulas. It's amazing. So what I really want to stress with this point is that you have to be very active on your use of internet. If you really want to be aware of what's happening in the world, you have to be very active, because what you're being fed through the internet is the stuff that is curated especially for you, for your previous searches, for your previous actions on the net. So you have to be very aware of that and try to sometimes look about different perspectives, look about different organizations, because otherwise you won't be really having a view of global view what's happening. And then that takes us to our next slide, Marta, which is 3 concepts. No, the previous one. No.
Sorry.
Yes, that one. There are slacktivism, which is oh, what happened? Hello, Marta.
Oh, hello.
Anyway, I'll keep talking.
Slides are gone. Hold on a second. I think my screen share is off.
Wait.
I'll bring them back.
I'll keep talking. So there's this idea of slacktivism, you know. It is a bit of a new term that is being used in theory of politics and theory of society, which is kind of like people are active, politically active, but in a very slack way, you know, very laid down, very only through internet, and kind of like giving, you know, posting things and saying like or don't like, and, you know. So the whole idea of action, it gets diffused, you know, because you think you're being very active, but you're only doing on the digital world, not in the real world. And from that, you can go to clicktivism, which is another idea that is very much in use nowadays, which is, you know, we click to many appeals, online appeals, and yes, I want to support this, and yes, I'll support that, and so on. But it just stays there, you know, you click. And when you're only clicking on things, you're not sure what's happening next, nor are you taking responsibility of the actions that are happening, of how you are part of the process of change, which is what being an activist, what being active actually means, you know. So we have to, so the world, the internet world is kind of, a lot of it is focus on slacktivism. A little bit less is focused on clicktivism, and activism is being reduced because people think they're actually really being active and politically active, but actually all they are doing is just clicking on internet, or even just sharing things or commenting about things, but not really doing things. So, and this idea that I saw something on Facebook and I could just have like, you know, oh, it's so good, somebody's trying to help somebody in Madrid, and actually I said, no, okay, I want to do something about it. I got in contact with this person, we share telephone numbers, we started talking on WhatsApp, and then I moved to visit all these people that were in need of help, and I started moving and doing things. And sometimes you don't really need to, you have to be open and aware of what's happening, because the internet is a great tool, but sometimes it kind of gives you an idea that, well, I don't know, there's not much I can do because everything is decided at a political level, and all I can do is sign online petitions. No, that's not true. There's so much more you can do. That's pretty much my talk. There are only 2 more slides. One is like, no, to go back about this broad question that is this week's topic. Should we open all borders? There are so many controversial things about this. I mean, and I'm sure in your little groups you will be talking about it, different ideas, why yes, why not, if we do, what will happen, the risks, because we live in a world that is ruled by risk and so on. But I would like to introduce you to the thinkings of a political thinker, a philosopher that was very recently I discovered about him. He's called Emmanuel Levinas. He was a French nationalist, but he was from Ukraine. He was a Jew, obviously, that had to move away during the Second World War, and he came up with this term that I really like, is the politics of home and hospitality. When it was introduced to me, I thought, yes, actually, I can feel and I can actually agree with what he's saying, because what he's saying is that when talking about the other, we have to think in three levels. You know, one is the realm of the self, as you yourself, and you should always be open to welcome people in your home. I mean, and that's an idea of fraternity, you know, like people in need will always have a place in my home. And then there's the second realm, which is the political, is the public space that is only constructed through all of us. Unless we all will open our actions to make the public space welcoming and being hospitable to people, the public space will never be a real public space, because otherwise it will always be only for those who are part of the public, not for the whole public. And then it comes to the third level, which is the political level, and how politics are always something very hard, and it's always about aggression and defense. And he thinks, no, we shouldn't think in those terms of aggression and defense. We should think more in being welcoming and opening our home, which is our states, to people in need. I think his work is amazing, and I really invite you all, if you have the time and the curiosity, to look a bit more into this idea of the politics of hospitality, because I only discovered it in my 30s, and I wish somebody had told me about it when I was 18, starting my university degree and studying about anthropology and social theory and all this, because it's a cool idea that's behind. So this is it, guys. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Lucia. This is really excellent and very informative for all of us to know. And yes, we do have a lot of questions for you. So let's see what we have here. Okay, there's one very popular question that I will read for you right now. So Fadi is asking, in this world, conditions like poverty in some countries and welfare in other countries, will opening of all the borders be a problem for these poor countries that most of their citizens will leave to have a comfortable life in the other countries? So that's a really, really great question. Very complex one.
Indeed. Yes. I don't know, like having worked in the development working framework, this is something that we always discuss, how this idea about the brain, was it brainscape, or I don't know the term right now in English. Anyway, this idea that the best people of developing countries or poor countries are always the ones that actually live to the Western world, to the developed world, to the North, whatever you want to call it. We really strongly believe, like the line of work that I feel more attached to, we strongly believe that anybody should be able to go wherever they want to go. And the reasons, whether they're economical, whether they are because emotionally they feel more attached to a different land, whether they are because they are looking for adventure, I don't know, whatever, it's okay. But at the same time, there are so many people that leave their countries because they feel they don't want to live, but they feel this is the only way that they can help their family or that they can actually survive. So I think you have to juggle with those two ideas, making it possible for whoever wants to live to do so if they want, and also providing for those countries that have not very good living conditions to improve their living conditions. So only the ones that really want to live do. And it's difficult, and I always have a lot of issues, like ethical issues with developing world work and so on. But I don't know, it's something to think about,
Well, we are thinking about it quite a bit this week, and it's good to see that you, as an expert who has done so much work and you have seen so much of what's been going on in Europe, you still feel like there's no easy way to answer it.
Because no, there's so many different.
Yeah, there's so many different conditions that affect both the displaced people and the host countries. So I just want to see, Yael and Andres, how you guys are doing, and if you want to take on the next question.
Yeah, we completely agree.
Hi.
Being part. Being part of UWC use this and we like, do it whether aware or but you're always active. You could move anywhere, live anywhere. The country culture
Marta,
would
are
fade
they?
away.
I think that we're having some internet
If different
connection
people
issues.
move. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay.
now.
If okay. The question is basically if different people could move across borders very easily, and borders would be open, would we not lose our culture and our cultural diversity?
All right.
Basically,
The question.
the identity.
Yes, yes. The question about cultural diversity and identities. I really, as an anthropologist, I really think that culture and identity are not bound to land. I mean, yes, land and the idea of borders are a way that we as humans, because we need to make everything concrete in a way. That's a way that we have come across to actually to put limits of what is culture and one culture where it goes through and so on. But I mean, if you think about culture is not so much something that is physical as something that is more on the emotional and on the intangible part of the human being, you know, so on the humankind. So yes, globalization in the way that it makes everything more homogeneous, you know, I see that idea, but I really think that culture is something that is more about the identity, about the feeling, about the person and its relation to a group of people. And well, I think no, I really have a strong debate to this all these arguments about that culture is bonded to a physical space. I really don't think it is. So, but then again, that is my own personal view. There might be people who think that they can only be identified culturally to a set of people if they are all in the same physical space. I think the whole idea of the diaspora that we've been, I mean, in social theory, we've been playing with it for the last 50 years, show us that you find culture diversity even in the most homogeneous group of people, you know, because people have a past and it's not that easy to erase that past, that cultural past, you know. Even if you are the son of an immigrant that lives in the UK and you speak perfect English and you really feel that you're a Briton, you're in Britain and you're a Briton, at the end of the day, there's this whole thing, this whole past, cultural past that you sometimes think you think that's not part of your identity, but it is. And it makes you different in a way, but diverse, and that is always really something good. And I don't know. Then again, it's another question that each one has to make their own mind about.
Lucia, I selected the next question for you, which has the most upvotes because it kind of connects what you were saying to a way of thinking that is very much data-driven. Because May here is suggesting that maybe we can find a way to collect data that can convince countries that are resistant to opening up borders to open up borders based on that data. So what's your perspective on that?
Yes, data is always great. Wait. Hey, yes, data is always great because we live in a world that needs quantified things. That's the social ethos we're living. But I mean, just collecting data is important, but the most important thing is how you analyze that data. Because as a social science person, I really think that we have this idea from the natural science that data is the truth, and that you collect data and the truth is there, and you just have to find a way to see it. And actually, on social sciences, it really doesn't work like that, not that much. You have data, and you have to know how to analyze it, because data can be used. I mean, the same set of data, you can use it to put forward an argument, such as just let's open the borders to everybody. But if it's used in a malicious way, it could be used to say no. We should close the borders. So, I mean, when looking at data, you really have to be not only about what kind of data you're going to collect, but also who is going to analyze it, and difficult
so
question
I think,
as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what you're suggesting here is that it's possible. We just need to be aware of the recipient of that data and what exactly we're trying to measure. And I think that there is some hope about maybe forming an economic argument about immigration in Europe, and how having refugees actually is good for economies versus the whole idea that it's actually detrimental to it. So that's a really good question. Let's move on to another one that I think is kind of connected to what you were saying. I'll bump it up here. And it's, I think, Bavini. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Bavini says, open borders is a nice thought in terms of economic development, but what concerns me to think that all people in this world, or what concerns me is to think that all the people in this world are not alike. So do open borders also mean that mobility of terrorists and people from violent countries may lead to increased crime?
Yes, that is the world of fear and risk that we live on. That is actually kind of being phrased on that question. Yes. Yeah, we have to. That is something that we have to be aware of. But then again, life is not free of risk. I mean, that is something that we have to be aware of. I mean, you really, like, whenever a political party, a government takes a decision on anything related to politics, even if they do it, they think it's something really easy and it will work really well and nothing bad will come out. There's always the risk. And the thing is that with some things, they always tell us that the risk is there. I mean, with some issues such as immigration or mobility of people, migration, there's always the risk, of terrorism, of infiltration, and so on. And with other things such as economical changes in our political system or our market. For example, right now in Europe, there's this whole talk about the Atlantic commercial and trade agreement with the USA. It's been sold to us as citizens as something that is risk-free, and nothing is risk-free. So I always wonder why some ideas are always sold as risk-free, and some other ones, there's always this idea, there's behind always the lurk that something bad is going to happen if we try them, because we're only talking about, I think things have been tried before we can actually see if they work or not. So risk, take the risk.
Yeah. Take the risk. Yeah, Lucia, I think that I'll jump in here because I just want to add something about the language here, because terrorists and people from violent countries is also making me think that we need to stop here and rethink how we think about people from other countries, because is it really realistic to classify an entire country as a violent country? It's almost like that every single person in this country is potentially violent, and I think that that's not realistic to assume. And at the same time, we are fed this language. We are encountering this language in many places that really should be giving us a less biased view of the situation. So I would encourage you all to think about that a little bit. And then let's have another question here that also is quite popular from Jarina, who's asking, I think that open borders would make it easier for people to transport drugs and other illegal things. It would also increase human trafficking and crime. So, can we afford to take all those risks? Are there any solutions?
Well, to start with, when you say open a border, we are talking about people. At least in the European Union, we have 3 levels of borders. We have the one for people, then we have the ones for services, and then we have the one for manufactured goods. We are not talking about opening the border for manufactured goods, because that will be opening the door for illicit traffic. We are not talking about opening the door or the border to services, which a bit of this whole human traffic could go through there. We are talking about opening the borders for humans. I mean, and it's not, when we talk about opening the borders, it's not like we are not gonna have I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, the physical borders will continue, and I think at the administrative level in every country, there will be ways in which people that move from one country to another, they can register themselves, and then they will be given the right to live and work. That's the idea, that anybody can move to a different country without having to ask for a visa first, or perhaps they have to ask for a visa, but the process to be granted that visa will be easier. It won't be, I mean, right now for some countries, the process is so difficult. Only the rich can actually afford to ask for a working visa, or for a residence visa, or for even a visiting permit. I mean, people from Colombia, I don't know if you know, but even if they just want to go on tourism anywhere in the world right now, it is so difficult for them to get a tourist visa. So to me, it doesn't make sense in a world that we live in, that we are so connected in so many levels. We should also try to be connected on that more physical level, the level of that if somebody wants to move to a different country, why not?
I think Elijah is asking a question about that as well, and is pushing us here to be more specific about how we define those borders. And I guess we don't really want to be very specific, because we want you guys to think about borders in any way you think is meaningful. But I think the question here says, does the open borders mean that all borders will be open? Or does it mean that it would just, and there would be basically no requirements at all, and we could just travel freely? Or maybe there will be a more administrative process, and it will take more time, but it will still give us the same result. What do you think is a more likely prediction?
Well, I don't know about a prediction, because I'm not good at that, but what I would like is a more easy administrative process to be able to move. Because I'm just thinking, for example, right now, the whole Syrian refugees fiasco that's happening at the entrance of the European Union, in Turkey and in Hungary. If Syrian refugees could ask at the European Union embassies in, for example, let's say Lebanon, for a refugee permit to come to Europe, we wouldn't be having the whole humanitarian crisis that we are having. If they could just go to the embassy in Lebanon or in Turkey, for example, to the Spanish embassy and say, hey, I'm from Syria, there is a war in Syria, I don't want to stay there because my life is on threat. I want to go and live in Spain, try to see if I can make a living. Will you give me a permit? And if they were given that, then all they had to do is take a plane and fly to Spain. And right now they're paying thousands of euros just to step on a little boat to cross a little bit of the Mediterranean to an island that is part of Greece, risking their lives, or crossing borders in Hungary. That I mean, there's these whole metal fences that have been built. That to me just doesn't make any sense. You know, putting all these borders to try to stop something that is gonna happen anyway. Because, I mean, people move. I mean, it's part of our nature. If you look at the whole history of the humankind, there's been migrations, and that's what's actually moved our societies. I mean, if we had stayed still, I don't think we'll be here now. If I really don't think we will be here now. We might have extinguished.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you, and I kind of want to steer our conversation into thinking, how can we help? How can we really do the volunteering work that you're doing? And so Selena is asking, what advice would you give to the volunteers who work with refugees?
Well, first, try and find an organization that has some history behind, that already knows what they're doing, because many times I see that when there is a humanitarian crisis, people really want to help, but they just want to go there and be on the field, you know. And sometimes it's easier to work with an umbrella of an organization because they already have the experience and they know where are people needed and when and which kind of profiles are needed. So I really think that is, for me, it's what always works. You know, whenever I try to look into some project or program, I look at who is already working on that, and I go and knock their door and say, hey, I want to help. Do you want me to help you? That's one thing. And the other one is to be open to keep your eyes open and be open to opportunities that sometimes come when you wouldn't imagine that you could be doing something good for somebody else, but also for yourself and for humankind.
Mm-hmm. So let's take another. I think most of these questions here have just one vote, so I'm going to take another question here. This one, it sounds really interesting. Why lots of people from different countries criticize those citizens who tell that we don't see any borders? And it's Obaidullah who's asking this.
Why?
So what are the dangers of being border blind? In other words, maybe it's about idealism and about you know, why isn't this voice of idealism louder, in a sense?
I don't know. I ask myself that question so many times because to me it makes. I mean, to me it's part of being of the ethics of being a human. You know what's good and wrong, and you know that everybody has the right to live and to a certain standards of living conditions. And if you see that your neighbor is not being able to have those certain living conditions, why not come here? To me, all right. And when I talk with people, people come with all this kind of, I don't know, bizarre answers. You know, like, yeah, but you have to think first about your own and security and all these things that we've been talking about. And yes, we are always called idealists or utopians or, I don't know, naive. Well, I think it's because we live in a very pessimistic worldview. We think that it's this thing. I want to tie it up with this thing I said before, that we need to be active participants of change. You know, we have to be activists, and that is being active participants of change. And unless you're aware that nothing is going to change unless you are part of that change, yeah, you will think that thinking that there are no borders or there shouldn't be any borders, you think, oh, that's naive, because of course there have to be borders. They've been there for centuries. Why wouldn't have them? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yes, it does. It's a complex issue, and I think that we are definitely fighting against a different big enemy, and we have to fight it from many different angles. And I think that positive thinking is one way that we can tackle this, but also just taking action. So being present and participating is the one way that we can do this, and then maybe there will be less people who will be criticizing us for our actions and for enthusiasm, right? I want to come back to this question because Nikita is asking, and you talked about this in your lecture, but maybe you can repeat that again. What determines what country the refugees will be sent to? If you could just repeat that answer, that would be great.
Yeah, that the country of entry in the European Union. So if somebody enters through Greece, for example, to the European Union, according to the Dublin Act, that's the country that should welcome, in a way, or should actually process the refugee asylum seek. I chose Greece because actually Greece is not compelling to the Dublin Act and is letting all the Syrian and Afghani refugees that are entering through their islands go all the way north to Germany and so on, because they say we don't have the economic capacity to deal with this group of people, so we're just letting them. But they're actually not following the Dublin Convention. The countries as Germany and Sweden and Austria that actually have a lot of refugees there are the ones that are actually using the Dublin action to send back refugees to the country of entry, to the European Union.
Interesting. It's sort of disheartening to see this happen and people really avoiding responsibility quite a bit. I want to move on. Really interesting and also really difficult, I think. So most of the migrants are indeed war refugees, like people from Syria, but there are also economical immigrants. So do you think that it would be fair to let only war refugees and not economical immigrants?
No. I think, as I said before, I think I said it, no matter what the reason is. I mean, there are people that want to, there are reasons that move because of economical issues. There are war refugees. Sometimes there are just people that like to move around in the world. So I think the reason behind why you want to move from one country to another shouldn't be what determines whether you're allowed or not. Because if you do it for that, if you attend to the question of, if you ask people why do you want to come in, and then you make a list of, okay, if you're a war refugee, you can. If it's because of economical reasons, you can't. And if it's because you want to spend your money in our country, then you can. Then you're not being fair, because you're just basing your decision on very trivial trivial issues that are not really. The person that's asking to move to your country really doesn't have the power to change their situation. If my country is in war, there's nothing I can do. And if I don't have enough money to live in my country, there is nothing I can do. And if I want to move, if I have a lot of money and I want to move to Switzerland, for example, because I'm a rich person, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't know if I'm making sense. Perhaps not. Look at your face, Marta. I don't think I'm making much sense.
I don't think they can see me and my face. No, my face was a reaction to questions, because I'm reading these questions and they're really excellent questions that everyone is asking, and my face was reacting to the fact that there's so many of us who are really, really seeing the open borders as an invitation to crime coming in, and I'm looking over there at Yael and Andres, who are still with us. I hope you guys had a brief moment when I could see you.
Hello.
And yeah, can you just tell which countries you're from and what is the advantage of of UWC, and how kind of it makes you think about culture and just in general, if you could talk about the borders and give your perspective on that. Hopefully we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent. So my name is Yael. I'm a second year in Mahindra United World College, which is located in India. And I am from Israel. And Israel has a lot of refugees, actually. We don't talk about it that much around the world, but we do accept a lot of refugees. But they are very much in struggle to accept, to be allowed the status of refugee. And I always find it very interesting that for them it's so difficult to be allowed into Israel, but for me it's so easy to be allowed into India. And it's very interesting in the context of being a UWC student, which is it in a way allows you to go after your studies to any country in the world. And I think many of the students that are with us today are students that could allow themselves to be going around the world and seeing different places. And for them, borders is a very non-existent or hardly existent thing. But at the same time, I would want to say that I think there is a certain ladder of reasons to which we should accept and not accept people's migration, in which a person who is escaping war and escaping persecution should be granted, for example, status of allowance into Europe more than me if I would want to go to visit Paris and stay there for longer. Yeah, I don't know if Andres is with me.
Yeah, I'm Andres, and I'm from Lebanon. And funnily enough, Yael is from Israel, and I'm from Lebanon, and we've our countries are kind of in a dispute.
We're causing
And
each other refugees.
yeah, and we're here just hugging each other and doing this together. And well, yeah, I think what you literally see makes you realize is that kind of all those borders and all those identities of you as a citizen um, of of your country, and it makes you give and take from that identity that you have, and it makes you realize so many things that you would have never realized if you weren't actually talking to that person face to face, or if you weren't sharing so many experiences with that person face to face. And UWC is a great network of people from all over the world, which just gives you so many perspectives on points that are really important in today's world.
Yes. Yeah, and I wanted to add one more thing and this is in the context of all the talks that we will have in the next 5 weeks. I find it very important to take everything that we say, as we are all UWC alumni and students, with critical thinking. We were all taught by the same system of thought, and that leads to the participators of the discussion and the course needing to be very critical towards everything that we are saying. Not saying that it's inherently wrong, it could be right, but thinking and reflecting about what we are saying and thinking.
And giving your personal point of view. If you disagree with us, just voice that so that we can about it and get to an agreement or a common ground.
Yes.
Well, it looks like we are almost out of time. So I just want Lucia to have the chance to say any last remarks, and then we will be inviting you all to join your hangouts on Thursday, because that is the next part of our course. We'll all be having more discussion in your small groups. So, Lucia.
Be active participants of change.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can hear you. Yael, Andres, did you hear that?
Yeah, we did.
We will do our best.
We are doing our best already.
Our country is needed for sure.
Yeah, the world.
Yep. Thank you very much to our speaker, Lucia, to Yael and Andres in India. I'm connecting from Poland, and we have many of you watching all around the world. So thank you for being with us, and we will see you all in Hangouts on Thursday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank you so
bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.